Good to see everybody here this morning. Appreciate your involvement and your interest in this. So officially from the Edisto Island Open Land Trust and sub that, the Environmental Committee, which is brand new to the Land Trust, of which we have a bunch of members here today from the committee. I'm the chair of the committee, so that's why I'm talking right now. But I'm going to introduce our panelists and let them get busy. We do have a lot of material, and let me just tell you this real quick. We're scheduled to go to 11:30, but it might be necessary to hold over just a few minutes. So when it gets to be 11:30, if you've got another thing that we need to get to, please just feel free to walk out. The good thing is at the end of the PowerPoint, there's going to be a QR code, and you can shoot that. And then that will take you to a link to our website where both the PowerPoint and the live video will be available for you to watch, and it will probably be up for ever, maybe. I don't know. So, and the reason I say that is like some of you might get some great information today, but you're not really quite ready to move on a project involving solar panels. But in 6 months or a year, if you want to come back and get some of the good data that you're going to see on this slideshow, or listen to somebody's explanation, you can come back and access both of them. So, but again, welcome. We appreciate you being here. Appreciate your participation. And so the three folks that are going to present today are here. We had a fourth, Thad Days, but he unfortunately had to be out of town today. But he did include, you will see some of his efforts here in the slide. So we have David Goll, and Jeff Sira, and Jay Watts. So those are going to be our three making a presentation, and we're going to start out with David, and then we'll move into Jeff and Jay. So one quick thing on the questions. We know there's going to be questions. If you think you have a question that might be for the benefit of the whole group, like a clarification question, something that's come up that might get a little complicated, go ahead and ask it at that point. If it's something that can be answered relatively quickly, I think they'll be fine with doing that. If it's something that might be complicated and long-winded, it might be better to hold it to the end. We will ask for questions at the very end. So don't think that if you don't ask one, you won't get a chance, because you will. So.
Yeah, and we'll hang out a little bit too if you want to talk to us individually.
Yeah. All right, David, take it away.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to start out with some disclaimers. So, we are just four guys who happen to have solar panels on our roofs, and we realize that we have some information just from having experienced this that we can share with people. And we're not being compensated for this. We don't represent any solar installers, but if you want recommendations, we can certainly give them. So we're going to start with my system. And whenever we're talking about solar panel systems, you always see the notion of how many watts does it produce. And this is basically an ideal situation based on the ratings of the panels, what the capacity your system has. And in reality, you never get that actual capacity, but it's just a way to compare systems, and it's the way that, based on your usage, the size of your system would be calculated. So my house is 1,600 square feet, and I've got a 6.57 kilowatt system, so it's 18 panels. So 18 times 365 is that 6.57 kilowatts. I'm using time of use net metering. That just means that any power that I'm generating with my panels that I'm not using goes onto the grid, and when I need it, it can come back. But because it's time of use, it's kind of segregated. And I'll get into that in more detail later. I don't have battery backup, but I do have a propane standby generator. And this was installed by Renew Energy Solutions. So my system cost started out close to $20,000. I had some incentive rebates from the installer because I had another installer who had given a quote. I wanted to go with Renew, and I said, hey, what can you do to make your quote more competitive? So they gave me $1,000 in gift cards. It's not a scam. And I also had a manufacturer rebate from Energy Sage. So you take those off, and that calculation is what you end up being able to use for your tax credits. So after the tax credits, you can see that my upfront cost, if you don't mind waiting a year to get your actual credit back, was pretty low. It's about $8,500. So put together this graph to show the generation, which is the blue line, the total used by my house, and overall, which is the green line, and then the balance in my investment as it pays off and hopefully goes to zero. It looks like I'm on a trajectory to have it totally paid off after 26 years, and after that, it's basically just free money coming in. So for all of 2023, I had a net power surplus, and I actually got money back at the end of the year from Dominion. But in 2022 and 2024, I did not have a net surplus. But you can still see, based on the trajectory, that I was still paying it off. So what was going on in 2022 and 2024? So in 2022, we were still using our old habits, and we would always set our thermostat down to 72 at night, just to have some nice sleeping weather. And we would set it down late in the evening. And it dawned on me that we could actually get by at 74 degrees overnight if we started it earlier, because we would actually feel the chill as the air conditioning came on. And just that one change made 2022 turn into our net surplus in 2023. And then what happened in 2024, you could see huge spikes there in our total use. Well, I bought an EV. So the EV charging takes a lot of energy. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it still works out. This is a separate topic, but for an EV, charging at home is much cheaper than buying gas. So I want to talk a little bit about the progress payoff. So it's almost imperceptible, but in that balance, you can see when, especially in the summer months, we're using more, we're actually getting a faster payoff. Seems kind of counterintuitive, but you're using more electricity, you're generating more electricity, and it actually accelerates your progress to paying off. So what do I think made this a success in my mind? So I had a sunny location, and it was facing the right direction. And using the tax credits was super important, as you saw earlier. It takes more than half of the price off. And I really liked the net metering, which Dominion calls solar choice, because it lets me use the grid as basically the perfect battery. Of course, the grid is not a perfect battery if you have a power outage, which I'll get into a little later as well. And because of Dominion's definition for time of use rates, I had to kind of pay attention to when I was going to be charged more for electricity and when electricity was cheap. And that helps towards the payoff as well. You don't necessarily have to pay attention to that, especially if you have battery backup, because the whole package today, systems kind of do this for you. And there's a controller that decides when the battery should be charging, when they should be compensating for expensive electricity, or when they should be getting ready for a power outage. So looking ahead, Back in September, Dominion changed their time of use to introduce what they call a super off-peak. But as part of that, they made their on-peak electricity more expensive. Plus, it's at a time of day when you're not going to be able to compensate via your solar generation, whether it's either early in the morning or late in the afternoon, depending on the time of year. So batteries would mitigate that, but buying batteries just to adjust to the new time of rates probably don't make sense financially. Okay, so that was my system. Thad is not able to be here today, but he gave me a lot of information and he put together these slides, so I will go through his for him. So he installed his in 2021. He has a larger house, 3,000 square feet, on a membrane roof. So you can see larger house, larger capacity, 8.71 kilowatts. He has 26 LG panels at 335. And if you remember back at my slides, I had 365 watt panels. As time goes on, the panels get more efficient. So he had to have more panels at slightly less capacity, but basically now I think the panels are going for 430 watts, kilowatts, well, 430 watts each. So time moves on, the performance gets better.
Are these US or China made?
It depends. Some are Korean, some are Singapore. The ones I have are REC panels and they're made in Singapore. The LG are Korean. And I'm not sure, Jay, what yours were. Okay. So he has battery backup, and his was also installed by Renew Energy Solutions. And if you remember back, that's what I used. So his system cost was significantly more, and that is almost entirely due to the battery. Of course, he had more panels, but batteries are expensive. But take that tax credit off, and it comes down a fair amount. And note that instead of 30% tax credit, which I had, he had 26% federal tax credit. That was because it was being sunsetted at that time, slowly. But as of 2022, it bumped back up to the 30%.
The tax credit carry over?
Sorry?
Can you carry the tax credit over?
Yes. So the South Carolina tax credit you could carry over for 10 years, period. For the federal, it's 10 years as of 2022, but it's also going to start sunsetting in 2032.
I thought it was in the South Carolina, you could take like a little bit each year, is that right?
Right, South Carolina does have a limit on what you could do each year. And
3,500.
yes, it's 3,500, but that, you can carry that forward.
So you aim to do the same?
Yes. And so this presentation is going to end at slide 50, and I've got another 20 slides that go into all those gory details that you'll be able to see afterwards. So, so his was installed in 2021. He is about a fourth paid off. The payoff takes longer because of the batteries. And it's really just that upfront cost. You're still paying off quickly, and if you were just paying off the panels, it would be very quick. So you have to think about this. Were you going to need battery backup or to standby generation anyway? You might not want to include that in your calculation for payoff because you have this benefit that you're getting from the battery backup. But note that he is still going to be paid off in just a little over 11 and a half years. And considering the system life is 25 or greater, because the warranties on panels are 25 years, he is going to be well ahead of the lifetime of panels. So this is just a graphic showing his generation and payoff progress. And this highlights the annual value of his generation, and it correlates very closely with electricity cost. So when the electricity cost goes up, your annual value of generation, basically your return on investment, is also going up. And this just shows his projection for when he's going to be paid off, and a projection based on 5% increase year over year on your electricity costs of the annual value. So he's very happy with this system. He's super happy with the battery backup in combination with the solar, because even though his batteries would be drained under normal circumstances because of the amount of energy he's using in his house, they were topped off by the solar. So he considered it effectively indefinite backup. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Jay now to talk about his system.
Okay. So, we built a new house in 2018, a little bit over 3,000 square feet. We did 10.8 kilowatt with 36 panels. We did not do battery backup. We are beachfront. There's an ocean in the backyard, and sometimes it comes in the front yard. I was scared of things, and then also too, just the space of batteries, and we had already figured out where all the bedrooms and the closets and things were, and we just didn't have room for it. Let's see. We spent $32,000, which when we were building a new house was just seemed like nothing. Tax credit, just, yeah, that was. So, initial investment, 14.4. Wow, it's almost paid off. It has generated power. Wow, that's looking good too. Yeah, that looks good too. And so I'm happy with it. I thought of it, so I wanted to be environmentally friendly, but I'm also think of it as an investment, and I looked at it as a single premium annuity. And so I write a big check and I get money back, and I might get most of my money back within the next year or two, and then I get dividends a few more years. I felt comfortable with it because we had a sunny spot and the roof orientation was turned the right way, and we don't have any trees that let squirrels come up and chew the panels and chew the wires. And it was a new roof, and so yeah, I'm happy with it.
Okay,
On to Jeff.
I'll let you drive for me.
Okay.
I'm gonna stand up. I just had a new knee put in and my leg is sore from sitting so long. So this is my second house with solar power. I had a house I built about 4 years ago in Durham McKay. I sold that house and now I'm building a new place over in Edisto Oaks. So this is the actual plan of the house. I had the advantage of being able to design the house for the right orientation to the sun. I cleared the lot only of the trees where I needed to get good sun exposure. So I kind of planned it around solar as being a major component of what I'm going to do. When I looked at my design originally, this is what I settled on, by the way, but the original design was going to be for 36 panels, 2 Tesla 3 Powerwalls. What I settled on was only 20 panels, 1 Powerwall. The cost was pretty hefty. Okay, 11.5 kilowatts. 36 panels would have given me probably close to 100% of my power needs, which was nice. But a couple things come into play. Dave will probably touch on this a little more later. We talked about net metering. That's where you sell your excess energy back to Dominion. One of the things I found out in my process was most of you, like me, probably have frontline insurance. Frontline insurance will not insure your house if you have net metering. This is new. Some of you may be on the front line and are getting insured, but if you want to have net metering, you will probably need to look at another insurance company. So I decided, and by being off of net metering, Dominion had no control over what I did with the size of the system. It was up to me. I could put as many panels on my house as I wanted to. I could only afford 20. 1 battery. The Tesla 3 battery is their latest battery. It just came out this year, and it's strong enough, it has enough power to run air conditioning. Although it sucks, it's used down pretty quick. Many of the battery systems out there just don't have enough gumption to run your AC. So what else can I tell you about this? 20 panels, 11.5 kilowatts. So you're 63% of my power, okay, will be generated by these 20 panels. I can always come back and add more if I want to do it at a later time. But in the next life, would do. Okay, this is the Tesla 3 Powerwall. It's probably about 4 foot by 2.5 foot wide. It weighs 300 pounds. And we're on at Jeremy K. I had to actually have it up above the high water mark, and even at Edisto Oaks, I'm going to have it mounted up, above any high water. Go back to that battery. Doesn't matter. Go back. Okay. So the system I'm putting in, 43K, 16,000 of that is just the 1 battery. So if I went for 2 batteries, second one wasn't going to be 16, it was probably going to be somewhere between 12 and 14,000. It was a little hard for me to put that much money into 2 batteries. You can see the tax rebate. Now keep in mind these tax rebates, you're not going to get that all back in year 1. I mean, I don't have that, I'm retired, I don't have that much taxable income. I wish I did. So it's going to take me multiple years, 2, 3, 4, to get my tax rebate back. After incentives, the system's going to cost me $19,000. Payback, I estimate, is going to be about approximately 9 years. Next slide, David. I think this was kind of interesting for me to see. I didn't develop this chart. The company I'm working with actually supplied this to me. But the average cost per kilowatt hour, over here on the right, the average rate, 15 cents a kilowatt hour. I think that's what we're probably all paying, 15 cents a kilowatt hour. Okay, fixed cost, $10.50. My house is going to be about 2,800 square feet of heated space. They're projecting my electrical cost at $222 for the first year. Every year after that, they're going to say the price is going to go up 5%. That doesn't seem too crazy. I think that's probably a fairly reasonable expectation. By year 25, I will spend $124,000 on electrical based on those. That's same if I use exactly the same amount of power on here as I did on year 1. So to me, that was a pretty no-brainer. From $222 a year to $693 by the end of 25 years. I don't know what's going to happen with power. I can't see the future. 25 years from now, will it come down? Will nuclear energy come down? I don't know, but that's a pretty big selling point right there. And I'm not trying to sell. I'm just saying. And when I went and chose to do solar power, it wasn't just for the dollar amount. I wanted to do something that I felt that I could help the environment. When I built the house in Derby Cay, I put in a big generator and a battery. I found out I don't need both. When power would go out, my generator would run nonstop, whether I was using power or not. I only had a 500-gallon propane tank, so 4 or 5 days maybe, if there was a big storm coming through, that it would keep my power running. With the battery, it's recycling every day, as long as the sun shines. Okay, you can just see the difference here between projected, what would be actual power consumption and after solar is installed. And this is an average across the whole year. My first house in Derby Cay, the shoulder seasons, 0 bill. Well, you got to pay that. Was it $14? The spring and fall, I had to pay the minimum, but I was not using any power from it outside of solar. I think that's it. Is there another slide?
Yeah.
Yep, that's it.
And what company did you use?
I don't want to be a commercial, but
No, but they told us what they use.
I use a company called Lost Energy out of Charleston.
Okay.
I think when you shop for a company, be really, really careful. There are a lot of companies I looked at. I probably talked to a dozen different companies, and 10 of the dozen I would not let touch my house. There was 2 companies I found that were really top quality, and I thought they were going to do excellent work. Will you talk about warranties also?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about
Okay, I won't go into warranties.
Okay. So, you may be wondering, well, you already are curious, but what do you need to go solar? So you need a place to put the panels, either on your roof or on the ground. It needs to be sunny enough, and so if you've got a lot of trees around you, it's probably not going to work. You need to be the homeowner. So federal tax credits, you could be a renter and pay to have it installed and get your credit back, but for Dominion, you have to be the owner. You need to check with your homeowners association, because they may restrict where the panels can go, or say you can't have panels at all. And put in this little bullet point, know your goal. So if you want to have this be a purely financial decision, or you want to be just super green and say you're going to reduce your carbon footprint, that's going to inform decisions you make as you go. So I'm somewhere on the continuum. I think we're probably all somewhere on the continuum. But for Jeff's system, for instance, where he's not going to use net metering, he probably would tend to be towards the environmental aspect, because the excess power he's generating is going back to the grid. He's just not being paid for it, but he will be making an impact.
Hey, David, could you expand on that net metering? I mean, I know you talked about it at the beginning, but I think some people might not have a full understanding of the effect.
Sure, I'll touch on that briefly right now, just to help you, but I do get into it in more detail. So net metering basically says that they're keeping track of power that you're generating, that you're sending back to the grid. So they know how to bill you. And any power you get that gets sent back to the grid is still your power. You can use it later for free. They make it a little complicated because it's time of use. So if you generate a huge amount of power that's going back to the grid at 2 p.m. On a summer day, and then you need it back at 6 p.m. that same day, you're not going to get that same power back. You're going to be paying for on-peak power. So,
The difference between on-peak and off-peak.
with their new setup, it's 26 cents on-peak per kilowatt hour. Off-peak is 12 cents per kilowatt hour. And their super off-peak is when you want to charge your EV, and that's 8 cents.
Jeff, I have a question.
Yeah.
Why would you choose not to be on that net?
So, like I mentioned about the insurance, Okay, so I'm putting some of my thoughts into why Frontline will not insure me if I do net metering. And that is because I am feeding power back up the grid. Okay, if there's a break in the power line and guys are working on the lines, there is a risk that they could get shocked. I could damage the grid by power I'm feeding back. Those are not good reasons, and my research shows they're not logical reasons. There's things built into my system that when the grid goes down, I stop feeding power. But insurance companies have all the power. And, you know, if I don't go with Frontline Insurance, I go with another company, it's probably gonna cost me $3,000 or $4,000 a year more for my insurance. And I'm not gonna make that back with net metering.
Got it, got it.
Why wouldn't you build a system that up front would send you a 1099 from the power company?
If you're on net metering,
Yeah.
Dominion controls the size your system can be.
Okay.
Okay, on my first house, they cut me off at 65%. They just said you cannot generate more than 65% of your power.
So any of you guys get the 1099?
I never did. You were not making money on it, you were just building a bank of credit that you could use later.
Well, I got a neighbor that got $1,000 1099 last year off of his system. That's why I mentioned it.
Wow.
That's
Well,
pretty
that was
impressive.
like serious.
Yeah.
When you were talking about, annuity.
Yeah, so is this someone here on the beach area?
On the island.
On the island?
That's very surprising
Yeah.
because Dominion doesn't want to have to issue 1099s. They want you to balance out for the most part. It's a partly grid technology. They don't want you pushing that much power onto the grid. When I had my net surplus over 2023, I got $11 back at the end of the year when we purchased my unused energy. So that probably was under the threshold for 1099.
That's right. Bells and whistles went off.
Yeah. That seems rare. It seems like somebody dropped the ball on estimating the capacity he needed. And I would say that somebody was Dominion because they get to approve it. But for him, that's great. 1099 implies that he got a lot of money.
I got a lot of roof, I could put a whole lot more panels on that house.
Yeah, but you count that as income.
Yeah.
So you pay taxes on it.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, and the last point, it's not mandatory, but have the house long enough to enjoy it. Okay, so what if the HOA says no? Or what if you just don't like the way panels look? So Tesla and others have solar roof tiles. So, some of those roof tiles there are actual solar and some are not. You mix and match according to the capacity you want to generate. So this is always an option. Now, they're more expensive than panels, but as I get into later, when you're considering whether or not you're going to even need to replace your roof before you put panels up, if you have to replace your roof, maybe you want to consider going with this approach because it makes it much more cost effective at that point. So the financial outlay, it's going to range according to the size of your house, amount of energy you use, and whether or not you want batteries, from a low of $15K to probably around $50,000. And I'll mention this several times, you may need to re-roof. If you've got asphalt shingle tiles, you want to consider re-roofing it.
It's great to put it on a new house, but if your roof is 8, 10 years old, you're gonna need a new one probably in another 10 years or so. Then you got to pay to get all the panels taken off, get the house re-roofed, put the panels back on. It's just not cost effective at that point.
If you need to go ground-based, just because of shade or configuration of your house, that adds cost as well. And financing and leasing are options. You can do it. So people may be wondering, should I just keep that money in the stock market? And that's the way I make money on inaction. Well, I ran the numbers on mine, and I was actually getting an annualized 13.63% payback. And if you look at average for S&P 500, that's pretty competitive. Plus, the returns are tax-free because unless you're getting a 1099, it's really just what you're not paying in a bill. Okay, it's more stable and predictable. Yes, panels do degrade over their life, but not by much. And it's very predictable that they're going to keep generating savings. So as electricity prices go up, the savings increase. Main trade-off is you can't sell your panels on the open market. Okay, if you finance, I won't go into too much detail here, but I just recommend some strategies for paying down that principal as quickly as possible so you're not paying interest longer than you have to. So leasing, simply by the list of cons there, I do not recommend it. And when people are canvassing neighborhoods in Somerville, trying to get you to buy solar, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to sell you lease packages. So it's going to seem great, no zero upfront cost, but man, if you ever want to sell your house or you want to get out of the deal, it's super complicated and expensive. So
Do not lease. It's not good. It's not good.
So, how do you even get started? So, you've taken the first step, you've come to this presentation, but I want to emphasize, while you want to know a little bit, you don't have to get totally obsessed about knowing everything. And once you find the installer that you trust, they're going to make all the critical decisions for you. It helps to know if they're leading you astray, but with the reputable installers, they won't be. But there are lots of online resources. This presentation will be online. EnergySage.com is great. In fact, that's how I got one of my manufacturer rebates. Plus, if you choose an installer through their website, because they're kind of also a referral service, they'll give you a free consultation to review the actual installer proposals, which was really helpful for me when I was starting.
Man, you check something?
Yeah.
If you go online, you start doing research, and you go to a site and they ask you for your information, they will send it out to everybody. Not Energy Sage, but
Right.
other companies will send it out and you will get slammed with tons of calls. So just be judicious on what information you give out if you don't want to get.
Right, home advisor will do that. Energy Sage is a little more responsible. There's resources that Dominion Energy provides, and of course the government websites as well. So, we mentioned this, want to emphasize it again, check with your agent. If you have Frontline, you don't need to check with your agent. Unless you really want net metering, then they'll give you quotes for other insurers. So Dominion Energy Solar Choice Rate Plan is the net metering plan. Jeff is going to be going with what's called offset only, and that would be your alternative. And going with offset only pretty much necessitates having battery storage, because otherwise you're just sending all that extra energy onto the grid, you'll never see it again. If you have batteries, you are basically maintaining some of what you've harvested from the sun, so you could use it.
And you don't need a generator.
And you don't need a generator, exactly. So, choosing an installer. You can use referral services like Energy Sage and Home Advisor, or even better, get referrals from people who have had experience with installers. They're all going to be on the Better Business Bureau, and if there are complaints, look to see how responsive the installer was. So I actually looked at Renew Energy Solutions on Better Business Bureau while I was preparing this presentation. And they've got a fair amount of complaints, and it's all been about roof leaks, of all things. And As I mentioned later, but I'll mention it now, if you have an asphalt shingle roof, you probably already know you shouldn't be walking on it much after it's installed. There are going to be a lot of people walking on that roof to install the solar. So they may have flashed it perfectly, but just by walking on it, they've introduced issues that will crop up maybe a year later. Anyway, I accidentally moved forward, but you know, get multiple quotes, ask for references, and talk to those references. If you don't talk to them, you won't hear the good or the bad about that installer. Okay, so decisions you need to make, which Dominion Energy Rate Plan. It basically boils down to it's going to be the solar choice, which is net metering, or the offset. Battery backup or not? You probably already you're probably already forming an opinion, but you're going to need to make that decision. And how do you pay? So we touched on this. In fact, I just did touch on this. You know, if you've got a metal roof, you're probably good to go, even if it's 10 years old. They're going to use clips. They're not going to penetrate it. You probably don't need to worry about that at all. Asphalt shingle roof, you will probably want to consider replacing. But your installer can help with these decisions. So, choosing the rate plan. We've talked about solar choice and offset only. I'll touch on what their other one is, buy all, sell all. So I used my usage as an example just to see if it would have been a wash in payback, and it is really not going to be beneficial to go with the buy all, sell all. I won't go into the gory details of what that exactly means. It's a little complicated, but just don't consider it. Your first two choices are the ones you're going to want to consider. Yes?
Can you go with offset only and then later go to solar choice, or is one on that?
You can, but offset only has just a single meter, a grid meter. When you go to net metering, they have to add another meter to measure your solar generation. So you're going to have permitting, electrical work, and the approval from Dominion to go through.
So you can go the other way, probably.
Sorry?
You have to switch it to the other way.
Yeah, it'll be
It would
exactly.
still
the same.
require an electrician and change wire.
Yep. So, battery backup makes a huge amount of sense if you don't already have some kind of backup generation. Most of us are on wells. If the power's out, we're not going to have water. You really need it. And when Jeff was talking about why Frontline doesn't like to insure or won't insure net metering, because it might be pushing power back onto the grid. A standalone generator like a Honda or something, that's actually the huge risk for linemen, because they won't have the cutoff switches that come with all of these systems. If you're depending on these portable generators, I would say you're risking linemen. You should probably go with battery backup, even if you don't go with solar, because it's a seamless transition if you have an outage, and it involves the cutoff switch that protects the grid and the lineman. I strongly recommend it. And I wish I had gone with battery backup when I did mine, but I already had the propane generator. I thought I didn't need it.
You would do it now?
I would do it now, for sure. And in fact, part of my decision was just not being educated enough about it. I thought, oh, I already have the backup generator. You know, how are they even going to do that with the batteries? But the systems now are very smart. And if I had done it with with my propane generator and battery is the batteries would kick in immediately. Then when the batteries get down to 10%, the generator would then kick in, top them back off, and then cut off again. So it's really cool.
Do the batteries have to be, interior?
They do not.
I had mine, my house was on stilts, so I had my battery inside the wall, but it was, lattice work, so just weather could hit it. It was just, I did it that way to give a little bit more protection.
Yeah, salt will impact things, but the solar panels all have salt ratings, the batteries all have salt ratings, so it should be fine even in our environment to have them outside, underneath or something.
Dave?
Yeah.
You said you would have done a battery even if you hadn't done, or you would like to have a battery if you hadn't had solar. What's feeding the battery?
The grid, but you can have it charge only during super off-peak, for instance. It would just stay topped off and only be used for backup generation. It wouldn't be used for different rates or.
It is one way, using a battery backup only without solar is one way to have some backup. But who knows how long the grid will be out? For 1, 2, 3, even 6 hour loss of power, that battery's fine. But if you get into a day or two, you have no way to recharge that battery without solar.
Right. Okay, so people think that the battery backup on their house is going to be much more powerful than what's in their car. That's actually a huge misconception. A car, like I have a Ford Lightning, it's got a 98 kilowatt hour battery. And Jeff's battery was a 13.5 kilowatt hour battery. So you're not going to be charging your car with your battery backup. It's just not going to happen. You can charge it a little, but
So something like a hybrid, with a small battery, you could supplement.
yes.
Sorry, if you're lighting, then you send power back to the house?
I could, if I had wanted to put in an 80 amp panel that would support my truck power in the house.
So you got a battery in a way.
I do have, actually, I could run an extension cord from my Ford into the house, and that power my refrigerator for sure. Yeah.
Jake, can you run an extension cord from your truck?
I actually have a Cybertruck that can power the house, but like it can power the house for the afternoon.
Okay, we have entered the realm of questions. We've done pretty good progress-wise. So, the first FAQ, one I hear a lot is, they're gonna have to drill my roof, right? And if you've got a metal roof, the answer is an emphatic no. There's this company called S5. They make clips for any kind of standing seam roof. And they clip on, no penetration whatsoever. And if you have a shingle roof, the answer is yes. They're gonna have to penetrate your roof. You're gonna need to bend some shingles up. So if your shingles are brittle after 10 years, that's gonna be an issue. Any other types of roofs, check with your installer. But Thad had a membrane roof, and that's actually not a problem at all to attach. You will penetrate, but it's not a risk. The main problem Thad had with his was locating the joists. So they would attach properly through the joists. Okay, will my battery backup burn my house down? So you've all seen the pictures of Teslas catching on fire by the side of the road. And yes, with the kinds of batteries in most cars, they have a huge amount of energy in them, and they're very volatile if there's any kind of insult to the batteries, any kind of penetration or water. But there are different battery chemistries. And in all but the most extreme situations, you're gonna have what's known as a lithium iron phosphate battery in your house. Lithium iron phosphate, or also LFP, F for ferrous, is ideal for houses because you could charge to 100% and drain to 0 over and over again and never harm the battery. With the kinds of batteries in cars, you don't want to charge up to 100% habitually, and you don't want to drain below 20% habitually because it will damage the battery. But the other cool thing is you can shoot a bullet through your LFP battery backup, and it will not catch fire. LFPs will burn if your house is burning, but everything else is burning too. And LFPs can be submerged and not catch fire. Of course, they will stop working, but at least you won't burn your house down. So, people ask, what is community solar? And in fact, our first announcement came out with the wrong title because it was on everybody's mind. What's this community solar thing? So if you can't install panels on your house because it's shaded or your HOA says you can't, or you're renting, you can purchase a share of a solar farm somewhere, or you could rent a share of a solar farm somewhere. And this is actually a really cool thing because you're getting pretty much the same benefit. But Dominion Energy doesn't currently have any community solar shares available. They did offer it for a while, and you'll still see it on their website, but it's basically all purchased or leased at this point. But in an ideal world where community solar is available, it's a partnership between the owner of the solar farm and Dominion, or the power company in general. And power company administers the billing aspect and all the maintenance and such is owned by the solar farm. And of course, renting or purchasing, you're still it's not as ideal as having your own panels because you're still paying a little bit of overhead for that solar farm.
It's like the $20 bag of vegetables you can get, yeah.
Right. Okay, so,
A question,
yes.
have any HOAs considered doing the solar farm? Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah, there's this notion of microgrids, and you probably heard of this one community in Florida that survived that terrible hurricane. I forget the name, which hurricane it was. They had their own solar farm. They had planned for a catastrophic event like that, and they had power throughout. Microgrids require that you be basically utility-grade solar capacity. It doesn't have to be solar, it could be other forms, could be wind. But it requires that you basically are running your own utility-grade plant. It's just the difference in capacities.
Other parts of the country are more into community solar than we seem to be here in South Carolina.
Okay, other questions?
With the storms we've had out here, y'all had any damage to your equipment or anything?
I don't know.
So what's it, you rated up for hurricane?
One of the aspects of getting solar installed is inspection to make sure your roof construction is substantial enough. And all of these attachment mechanisms, either the clips or the integrated flashing, have to be rated for certain wind. And your panels themselves have ratings for the amount of wind and hail they could withstand. And heat, yep.
Do you have to straighten the roof for the weight of the solar panel?
They're not heavy.
Yeah, so the question is, do you have to strengthen your roof? And no, the panels are 40 pounds each. Part of the inspection is make sure your joists were substantial enough in the first place. But they they have enough over-engineering built into them in the first place that you don't need to strengthen to attach solar panels.
Do any of you all, go for a fortified roof?
We didn't, I didn't fortify anything in the roof.
Right, yeah, the question is, did you have to fortify your roof? And no.
I mean, do you choose to do that?
There's a system, I don't know, it's kind of new, but it's like a fortified roof. It's like some ABC, I think it's the South Carolina ABC, said that you can make your roof stronger. It helps for insurance and maybe more nails and more boards.
You know, maybe that's comparing different building codes. If your house was built 20 years ago, it's built to a different code than a very old house. And I think the newer construction is, I mean, I can't see any reason you'd want to fortify a new construction.
I have a question. You mounted your solar battery in there. Do you have to put anything special, or that looks like can hold that weight?
Well, I didn't put it on the slats. I have big 12 by 12 beams, and they just mounted it right on one of those big pylons.
Okay.
Okay, one big time.
One big
I
pylon.
mean, on the stud itself.
Yeah. Underneath the house. Yep.
The post of all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. When are we going to talk about warranties or?
Go ahead.
I think it's important to talk about warranties. There's a number of different warranties that come with solar installation. The first is on the hardware. Will it just keep working? You know, and most companies warranty those for 25 years. But the other one is performance warranty. You know, on year 5, will that solar panel generate as much power as year 1? Well, no, they don't. There's a degradation. But most companies will warranty them, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, I think it's like to 92% efficiency by year 25. So they're only losing 8% efficiency on the panels. If they go below that, they're covered by warranty. Also on your battery, the Tesla batteries, I can't speak to anything other than Tesla. They warranty their batteries for 10 years, and the performance is 70% of capacity at year 10 of storage as it was in year 1. Other parts of the warranty you want to make sure you get is, he talked about leakage. I think the company I use warranted their installation and leak proof for, I think it was 10 years. I have to look at my paperwork again. And that wasn't just, you know, if it leaks, we'll fix the leak. If it leaks, we will fix all the sheetrock below it that got damaged. So that's a critical piece. They do a great job of installation, but if there is a weird leak, you don't want to pay for redoing the whole interior of your house. There was another warranty.
Yeah, so Renew Energy at least, and probably others, offer a 5-year guarantee that you're going to generate what they said you would. So they spec'd out your system, they said it's going to generate this much power, and if that does not come true within 5 years, then they promise to address the issue.
How did they do that? I'm sorry, did they have remote monitoring of your house?
Oh, that's a great, I'm glad you said that. You want, Jay, you have a Tesla system?
No, it's in phase.
Oh, okay. With the Tesla, there's an app on my phone. And I don't have it because they sold the house. No, they're doing it. But, I mean, I can look at it any time of the day and see exactly what that system is putting out. It monitors what it's put out for that entire day. I can look back through the whole year, check it. Other things like in the app, it's got something called Storm Watch. So if a bad storm is coming and there's a good chance the grid could go down, it automatically stops consumption of battery power. It lets my battery go to 100%, and I'm using grid at that point, and then if it does go down, I have a full battery to run. So the apps that many companies, I'm sure Tesla's not the only one.
Yeah, so you're going to hear Tesla and Enphase primarily. Enphase provides their own batteries. They provide the microinverters that attach to each panel. They provide the control systems, and they also report out to the web and to the cloud, I should say. And that's how Renew is able to monitor as well.
Do we have an idea of their warranty?
Sorry?
The warranty on that one Enphase, or, you know?
Well, it's probably gonna depend on the equipment, but I don't know what the warranty is on the microinverters, but the microinverters are expected to last as long as the panels.
The other thing with the within phase, I was concerned, I went, it's a long way up to the roof. I'm just not going up there. But each of the panels, if a panel goes out or inverter goes out, that panel goes out. It's not like a serial connected thing that takes out. It's not the whole string of Christmas lights. It's just the one bulb kind of thing. So,
Another thing that people have asked me about is how often you have to clean them. You don't. You don't. The rain takes care of it. Now, I imagine if you were in a really heavily wooded area where you had a lot of pollen, that could be an issue. But I wasn't going up 3 stories on my roof to clean those panels. And I had no problem now. You're a little more in the woods, David.
Yeah, so I was worried about this at first, because everybody knows about the pollen season, and my panels were looking mighty green, and I thought, I'm gonna have to get up there and clean those. But these panels all have coatings on them, and rain eventually did the cleaning for me. Now, Jay is having an issue with his solar generation decreasing faster than it seems like it should, and that's probably because of salt built up on it. So in his situation, maybe he would want to clean, but I don't know if you remember his graphs, even though he was generating less overall than expected, he was still getting a higher payback because of the increase in electricity cost.
What
So-
distance is your house from the beach, from the water?
I mean, it is.
He's on the level.
Yeah, you get the only salt.
Right.
Yeah,
And so,
and quite honestly, if I would have bought existing house, I would not have put a solar panel on it like and if I had a shingle roof, I would not put solar on it. I had new construction, metal roof, standing seam, and even though I know things are supposed to last 25 years, I can sit on my porch and watch things rust. My brain went, if I get 10 or 15 years of useful life for this, anything else is a win. And we're 6 years in now, and if I found someone that had a nice tall ladder and was willing to climb it for a couple $100, I would clean the panels every 6 or 8 years, but I'm not in a real hurry to do that myself.
Yeah, I do have asphalt shingles on my house, and because it is a brand new roof, I have no qualms about putting it. I had them show me the method they use, and if you recall from David's picture, it's a big steel plate, and they put a lot of tar into that and press it down. They didn't even have to lift any shingles on mine, it was all pressed down and then bolted down to the roof, so they felt very strong. I will never see a leak.
the flashing systems are really good.
Yeah, are there any special on-site inspections by Dominion or by the insurance company before you have solar panels?
Well, I had an inspection by the county. I'm in Colleton County. So they came out and inspected it. They did not go on the roof. I think he had the same opinion I have. I'm not going up there. But they did come out and did a visual inspection for the grounds. Dominion did come out and look at it. I don't think they went up on the roof either. They do all the meter work for both net metering, both meters. Trying to think.
Insurance company?
Insurance company, I think, just did the ground inspection, took some pictures.
Okay. And those, the federal credit, you know, for this stuff, is that locked in, or could that change?
Well, that's a good question, Vito, and I don't think anybody here can answer that right now. I just don't know. I hope not, because I haven't submitted my new house yet. I really
According to the current legislation, it's good through 2032, the federal.
I think I read or heard that with the incentives and the rebates that are currently available and the way they read, you can use those to lots of things, installation, batteries, wiring, but you can't use it to improve your roof. Do you all understand that?
That is correct.
So any roof improvements you had would be totally on you.
Yeah.
And you could not claim any kind of rebates for that.
Yep.
Right.
And is it also true that if you rent your house, there are limitations to the rebates or incentives?
Well, no, for the federal tax credit, but Dominion requires that you own. They will work with the owner of the house.
No, I mean, but if you rent it out.
Oh, if you rent it out. Okay, so, yes, federal requires that it not be a rental
It's
property.
got to be your domicile.
And what about
It
people
can
like
be
state?
it can be a second home for federal tax credits and state.
Okay.
It just can't be rented out.
Okay.
David, is there a way of comparing, I don't know if this is apples and oranges, the generators versus the LV generators versus the batteries, so there's some basis of comparison?
It is almost apples to oranges, but for an LP generator, you're gonna probably want to have it on its own propane tank and not shared with where you're cooking, for instance. You're gonna have to make the decision whether you rent or own the tank, whether it's above ground or below ground. Then the generators themselves, when I got my Generac in 2020, I think it was $12,000 installed. Compare that to a battery, it's pretty comparable.
And the battery, it can do dual purpose. It's not just there for backup, it's there to use your energy if you have solar.
So you could have a battery around the Generac?
Yeah. That's exactly what I'm going to be doing at my new place.
Yeah. And sunlight will serve the same purpose of keeping the batteries topped off so that they will last longer than they would have.
Even if you don't have solar panels?
Well, solar panels are kind of integral.
Yeah.
You don't have to have them to have battery backup, but it makes a huge difference. You probably should.
One of the keys, if there is a long power loss, how quickly will your generator consume your propane? If you have a battery backup on a solar system, every 12 hours, you're regenerating.
How long do your house will last on the solar battery?
Well, that's a good question. With my first house, without air conditioning,
Repeat the question, please.
the question was how long will I get out of the battery? I had a Tesla 2 battery in my other house. It was 2,300 square feet. With air conditioning, it was probably about 6 hours. Without air conditioning, it was probably pushing 12 to 18 hours. And I didn't have my air conditioning set up to automatically go off on my first house. I had it where I would just go and turn it off with the thermostats to try and preserve my electricity use.
If it's sunny the next day after the storm, it will take it back.
Right back up.
It will be back.
Yeah, and we charge up pretty quick.
You mentioned about you can't use the rebate for improving your roof. Is solar shingles fall into that category, or is that?
So I don't know how that actually shakes out because
Don't ask trick questions. We don't like those.
because some of those shingles are solar, obviously. I don't know what it means for the overall cost of installing that kind of roof though.
Yeah, on those solar shingles, it's probably 50% solar and
Whole roof
50%.
would be solar shingles, you have shingles, you have the solar.
Yeah, it's only like half of them are solar on some of the designs I've looked at.
Right.
I don't know. Any other questions?
Yeah, when you have shingle roof, so when you put the solar
Mhm.
panel, does it give you extra light on that matter? Because
Well, there's two thoughts on that. She asked if by putting solar panels will extend the life of my new asphalt shingles. One, yeah, it is protecting you from the elements, but I was a little concerned, and my reading disproved me that the panels will generate a certain amount of heat. And how will that heat affect the shingles underneath it? Will it cause curling? In the 3 years I was at Sira McKay, that did not happen. I did not go up and look under the panels. I got to use a pair of binoculars, but I did not see any degradation. But my reading says no, that it does not get that hot underneath the panels.
Yeah, there's airspace underneath.
Yeah, not a lot, there's only 2 inches maybe.
so it's like it remains to be seen whether it helps the lifespan or it shortens the lifespan.
I would probably, as a layman's view, saying no difference.
So I think it will probably help that part of the roof, but the rest of your roof will age just like before.
No, I may have missed it, but in terms of the lifespan of the actual solar panels, I know they haven't been around long. What is their lifespan? You said like,
The warranty for 25 years. Now, the panels I'm buying are made by a company I believe it's called Qtron. They're made in Georgia. And they're the only company I found that has been around more than 25 years. I didn't even know they made solar panels 25 years ago.
right,
But will they get more than 20? If they're warranted for 20, you gotta figure they're gonna go a little longer. But my thinking is, in 25 years, there's gonna be something a whole lot better than that solar panel round.
Yeah, so the panels are also warranted for a certain amount of degradation each year. And that's where the 92% comes in at year 25. But there are no moving parts in them. So it's really just the chemical changes that happen because of all that solar hitting them.
Kind of in summary, I'm going to say, if you're thinking about solar, talk to your insurance company early in the game. Find out where you stand with whoever you're using for insurance. Anything else, David?
So notice at this point, we're on slide 51 of 75. I've got a lot of extra detail that covers a lot of these questions that you've asked. So when you go online after the presentation, you'll be able to see the whole deck. It's not up there right now, but once we're done, it'll be up within the next couple of days.
And again, keep in mind, the three of us are just homeowners that have done a lot of research on it. We're not industry experts. Bob?
You sound pretty knowledgeable to me.
Holly, anything you want to close with?
Only that, I don't have solar panels, so I don't have the kind of knowledge that they do. I did listen to a webinar the other day that was produced by this group that they are advocating called Energy Sage. I encourage you to check them out. Google Energy Sage if you don't already know about them. They have all kinds of, they are not an installer. That's not somebody that you're going to buy your stuff from, but they have lots of good information. So check out Energy Sage for one thing. The other thing is that be aware of, like we were talking about briefly, the community solar. I just saw the other day, probably some of you have seen it as well. Some company has a proposal out to Colleton County right now to build a 800. What was the KW?
Kilowatt?
Kilowatt, is that what it is?
Big more than 100.
Gigawatt. Gigawatt? Okay, array in somewhere close to Walterboro. So, things like, and of course there's one going down towards Beaufort, there's one up in the Kennedy's area that's been there for a while.
The one in Walterboro's 800 acres on Mount Carmel Road. I looked, it's nothing but forest land that they're cutting the trees down. And it's megawatts, and they'll power 10,000 homes. They're building it for $45 million to do that, to power 10,000 homes.
Did you see which energy companies is Dominion?
Well,
Who's
it's
doing
Kennedy's
it?
LLC, Solar LLC, which is Kennedy's, and it'll probably tie in where they took out that coal station on 61 and tie into the power grid there. But it seemed tied to a Canadian one that I went online, it had tons of them all over the world. And they're basically a power company that does solar. But wouldn't that be great on Edisto to have 300 acres of power the whole island?
Well, depends how it's done.
There was one thing that the webinar that I looked at from Energy Safe also said, and somebody asked this question, and none of us know. Their advice that they're giving all of their people is to, if you're thinking, in terms of how long the incentives and rebates, might last, they were kind of encouraging people to act quicker rather than later. But they also encourage you to check with your insurance people, to check with somebody in your county or state, just to see. So, even though you can use a multi-year deduction strategy, that they were also when you do your taxes for 24, if you're going to do a project soon, if it will qualify for 24, try to get some in that.
It's based on installation date though. So
Right.
Well, it's based on when it is turned on.
Turned on, yeah.
So mine was installed, actually I didn't bridge a year. Installation started in January, but it's really when it's enabled that you can claim that as the year you got solar.
After the federal and state credits, can you depreciate the panels?
Maybe if you're a business, but then you can't get the credits.
Yeah, the business aren't eligible for the tax credits. If anybody wants to talk more after this about installers that I used or David used, please feel free to stop and see us.
Any further questions? Well, thank you. So, first of all, let's thank our panelists.